So sort of with like a dietitian hat on, thinking like, if I'm cruising the baby food aisle and I feel overwhelmed and I don't know whether I'm making the right decisions as far as how do I know he's got enough veggies in the day? How do I make sure he grows up to be an adventurous eater? What's really in this jar or this pouch? How do I combine them to give, the balanced nutrition he needs? And I was frustrated because I thought, well, these companies, the big players, the Nestle's
Yeah.
out there, they all have dietitians on staff. Like, why is no company trying harder to solve this and to, know what my pain points are and to make it easy for me? So this is, a fire basically started in me, and I just couldn't put it down. And so when Jackson was 18 months old, I left Starbucks to set out to solve this.
Hey there, welcome to Rested Mamas Talk. We're Chelsea.
And Mika, your certified pediatric sleep coaches who were once exhausted mamas just like you turned into rested mamas who now have helped hundreds of families get better sleep in 3 days with an alternative to traditional sleep training.
As creators of the Association Fading Sleep Method, we teach a responsive and holistic approach. Our podcast is dedicated to sharing the journey from true parental exhaustion to thriving parenthood.
From real sleep tips from us and other experts to real stories of families just like you.
Let's get rested. Hey there, fellow moms and dads. It is Chelsea here. Welcome back to another episode of Rested Mamas Talk. I am Chelsea, co-founder here at Rested Mama Happy Baby and co-host to Rested Mamas Talk podcast. Again, we're really excited to have you here. But today I'm especially honored because I will be joined by the co-founder and CEO of Square Baby. Square Baby is really a very specifically fresh, organic, dietitian designed baby food company. And I have Katie, who is the co-founder of Square Baby and founder. So welcome, Katie. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I know. It's so exciting. One thing that Meek and I talk a lot about is how, things like us with sleep coaching, that was not our first career, right? That was not necessarily what we aspired to be, which is where life has led us, right? So I'm sure just like you, life and experiences within your life have kind of led you to where you are today, but also to the creation of Square Baby. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about what was that career like that actually led you to Square Baby? What was that journey like for you? Kind of where are you now and why, essentially?
I love it. Yes, you're right that our paths lead us to where we're headed, and sometimes we have no idea,
Mhm.
where we're going and how these experiences got us to where we are. But it is so interesting to kind of look back and see what's really motivated us. So my background is I'm a registered dietitian. I got my master's in nutrition, and while I thought I would always be on the clinical path with nutrition and was very interested in pediatrics, I ended up getting a job right after grad school and right after I got married in 2004 at Starbucks. And it
Mhm.
was a 3-week contractor role. I was coming in to really just kind of crunch the numbers, tell them all their first beverage brochure. I don't know if you remember these things, but they like folded out every which way to
No,
Sunday, and
actually,
it
I
had like
do.
every line
Yeah. It's
of
been a while since
every,
I
right?
thought
It was
about
like,
that. Yeah.
right? 2% short, vanilla latte. Here's nutrition. Okay. So it was thousands and thousands of line entries of this. So that was my first project at Starbucks. Took me
Mhm.
3 weeks to complete it. And then I really was just had this mindset of like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to be done
Yeah.
with this job. I kind of have this understanding of, at least within beverage, how I could be helpful as a dietitian. So I convinced them to let me stay. And over the course of the next few months, we created the first nutritionist role. And it was really, as I look back at it, very entrepreneurial, right? It
Mhm.
was kind of showing, what you're capable of and helping to, propose new ideas. And so over the course of the next 6 years, we created the first health and wellness strategies and really overhauled the menu and nutrition, created nutrition guardrails and ingredient standards, even, kids meals, new
Mhm.
healthy options. Anyway, was very passionate about the job, was absolutely my dream job. Couldn't believe I got to do it. I was learning so much, and had so many great opportunities. But in 2008, I had a baby.
Was it boy or girl?
Now,
I forget which one. Is your oldest a boy or a girl?
they're both boys.
Oh, they're both
So
boys.
yes,
I'm sorry.
15. He has his driver's permit, Jackson. And I, like every parent, whether you're working outside the home, part-time, full-time, not working, you're overwhelmed, right? And you're looking for help. You're looking for some brand, some company, some solution to give you some direction. And so I think cruising the baby food aisle as that mom who definitely needed store-bought food, I was like, I can make little things here and there, but I was getting home at like 6 p.m. from the office, and then I would have to, pump and clean, do all the things that we need to do. Jackson would go to bed at like 7. So I was like, I've got like 1 hour with my little one.
Yeah.
I wanted to spend it snuggling. So, long
Or not
story
having
short.
to like make your own baby food too, which is what
Yeah.
I did.
Yes. Yes. And it can be
Although
joyful,
it can be
right?
joyful and it definitely can, but you're right. It was a time commitment.
Yeah.
But you're saying, just like you're saying, I didn't love what I would see walking down the grocery aisle. And
That's right.
it just didn't really resonate with me. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
that's my choice then. So, but
That's right. So sort of with like a dietitian hat on, thinking like, if I'm cruising the baby food aisle and I feel overwhelmed and I don't know whether I'm making the right decisions as far as how do I know he's got enough veggies in the day? How do I make sure he grows up to be an adventurous eater? What's really in this jar or this pouch? How do I combine them to give, the balanced nutrition he needs? And I was frustrated because I thought, well, these companies, the big players, the Nestle's out there, they all have dietitians on staff. Like, why is no company trying harder to solve this and to, know what my pain points are and to make it easy for me? So this is, a fire basically started in me, and I just couldn't put it down. And so when Jackson was 18 months old, I left Starbucks to set out to solve this. And it was really, first few months really toying with like, how do I really create a solution? Okay, it's not a cookbook, because like as much as you can make recipes, like great, we all have so much time. And then I was like, is it okay? I think it's got to be a food product. Okay, that's a lot harder than writing a recipe book. Darn it.
Yeah.
I was like,
That's
is
a
it
whole
fresh? Is
other
it
path.
shelf stable? Yep. And I really wanted to, and again, knowing it's a lot harder to build a, frozen food company, especially then, being, really early on in that category, I knew that if I was going to do this, I really wanted to solve for all the pain points. So it wasn't like, let's take the easier way out and, solve part of it. And so what Square Baby became was really solving for every pain point I had. And some of those major ones being, when I cruise the baby food aisle, like I said, it was like, how do I know what to give him in a day? There are recommendations that are deep down and, bottoms of blogs and websites of the AAP. They're all broken down like, well, give your kid, 4 to 6 tablespoons of this and 2 to 4 tablespoons of that. And I'm like, well, who's going to measure that out?
Right.
And who's going to even know this jar or this pouch? Like, that's not helpful to me. So I took all of that information, all of that research and all those recommendations and created the Square meal system. So what that means is any 2 to 3 meals, any 2 to 3 of our Square Baby meals, whether, so a 6 to 8 month old, 2 meals, 8 to 12 months is 3 meals a day, is 100% of the recommended veggies, fruits, grains, and protein. So that's sort of like the building blocks of here's a kind of core nutritional promise. Like we've done the science and the research, we got you. These are all interchangeable. We have vegan, vegetarian, and animal proteins. We have allergen introduction and allergen free. But I also wanted to solve what I saw in the next decade before I was able to launch the company, right? Jackson's now 15, was really as the pouches started to come on the market. So it was very new when Jackson was a baby and a toddler. And at first they were really cool to me because I was like, oh, great. I've seen kale and quinoa and more organic, and this pouch is super convenient, to hand them
on the go.
back of the feet, right? But what we started to see as the pouch category really grew and you started to see all of these products that kind of became these Me Too, samesies meals, is that many of them were incredibly fruit forward. And as a dietitian, obviously fruit is a healthy part of a balanced diet. But when you're giving your kiddo a super sweet meal for every single meal, which is pretty easy to do with those pouches, you're not really training their palate. You're not giving them the green veggies they need. They're not getting the balanced nutrition that they really need. And so that's where I knew the square meal system stood for something, is backed by, you know, science and research and recommendations, right? And every single one of our meals is veggie forward. So just in that, we have a third of the sugar of most of the pouches and twice the protein and healthy fats, just due to balanced nutrition, right? But of course, zero added sugar.
I think that with me too, Kate, like kind of something you just mentioned, one of the reasons why I not only was, I just didn't love what the choices that I had, but I also was a working mom. And so I knew I couldn't basically make food every day. And so I would also like spend some of my weekend time essentially like meal prepping for my baby. But it does, you know, it is time consuming. And one of the things that I really would just, which I think a lot of you who are listening to this is also feeling, I didn't want my kiddo to be a picky eater. And I, you know, like you were saying with the like very fruit forward, it is a very sweet, almost sugary taste. And I have found that sometimes that can result in just, you know, a little less adventurous eater, especially when you get into toddler and also childhood as well.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we want a baby and a child to enjoy mangoes and peaches. And of course, like absolutely. And the tartness and the sweetness and all of these things that are great for their palate development. But if they never learn to enjoy bitter, umami, earthiness, they're going to pick up that vegetable as a toddler or as a baby, right? And be like, ooh, this is not that sort of
not what I'm used to.
Right? So when we combine foods, we just need to be really thoughtful about making sure that you know, that they have opportunities to really learn to taste, you know, that not every vegetable is drowned out with fruit or other foods, right? They really learn to taste and love, you know, the various foods. And it does take several exposures, right? We know that. And so
and that's okay.
Anyway,
and that's okay to give them that exposure. One thing that we talk a lot about, I know we talked about this too, you know, we talk a lot about how when we look at sleep, so kind of to put in a sleep perspective here, we really want to look at all components that play into a child having that really good, consistent and consolidated sleep. And with our approach and program, as you know, Katie, we really do look at not only nutrition, but your feeding routine. What does that look like? Is baby getting adequate calories as well throughout the day? Because of course, that is one of the ingredients. It is a factor in baby having that really good, consistent sleep, right? So one of the things that we talk about with the clients, maybe we can kind of go through it together. I think that would be kind of fun, is like, let's talk about the nutritional needs here in the next first year and a half of life. I know as a first-time mom, that was one of my biggest questions. What do I need to be giving my baby? You know, where are they getting their source of calories? When they do get to this stage, am I supposed to be doing something different? Please know to always talk, you know, like what we say, right? Always talk with your pediatrician, always get their advice and recommendations, especially because they have eyes on your baby. They know what that growth curve looks like, but just kind of, let's go through generally. So we're kind of thinking like kind of breaking it up, 0 to 6 months. What, like as a dietitian, what do you say, which I think everyone probably knows, but what would you say where somebody or a baby should be getting the majority of their calories during that stage?
Yeah. So obviously breast milk and formula are the mainstay of their diet, you know, up until 6 months. Some babies are ready for solids a little bit earlier. 6 months tends to be like that general recommendation. But I think some of the other things to be thoughtful of is allergen introduction. So this key window to introducing allergens early and often is 4 to 6 months. So whether that's an allergen powder added to breast milk or formula, just that really early exposure. So, so if you're not starting, complementary foods, solids until 6 months, think about allergen introduction a little bit prior to that. Again, speak to an allergist or pediatrician, et cetera. But in general, as well as iron fortification. So natural iron stores deplete around 6 months or so. Usually that is, a lab that's taken at that pediatrician appointment. I remember coming home, being so freaked out, like you kind of expect that it's going to happen, but you get that notice like, well, okay, well, your baby's low in iron. You're like, oh my, what do I do?
What do I need to do?
Right? It's like the first thing you're freaking out, like, what have I done?
Yeah.
Again, even though, it's completely natural. So thinking especially breastfed babies are going to need the iron fortification. So whether it's, droppers or iron fortified cereal or whatnot. So just be mindful of
that's really important though, because one thing I don't know if you knew, but low iron or iron deficiency does play into sleep. So if a child is low in iron, that can contribute to additional nighttime wakings and difficulty with sleep as a whole. So that's a really, really good point. So with readiness, in terms of, baby food, my daughter, actually my son, they started solid meals a little bit earlier, a little bit before 6 months, but they just kind of showed that they were ready as well. So I know like the biggest ones, right, is that baby is sitting up and they're able to sit up well. When that tells us they have enough muscle development to be able to swallow, to digest the new foods. What other things, like as a dietitian, do you say like, I don't really know, you're quite ready, or yeah, let's go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think there's some other general milestones, like they've doubled their birth weight. Again, really that they're holding ability to hold up their head, right, and sit. And I think it's listening to your baby's cues. I had two very different feeding experiences with my boys. My first, opened his mouth like a little bird for every single bite I gave him. And I was like, this is so fun.
And it should be fun. Yeah, we want it to be fun. Yeah.
It's just like, they're looking at your food. They're interested. It's a positive experience. But I think with any recommendation, any milestone for anything baby related, I think as parents, what we learn, especially after the first one, is like every baby is different, and listen to your baby's cues and your own intuition as a parent.
Yeah.
Because with my second little one, I was so excited to start. And here I had, and actually it was with Nolan, I had started to develop square baby meals. So he was the first that grew up as I was iterating through all these different recipes.
Square baby.
He was. He's now 11. Actually, a little chef, which is really fun. He loves.
Really cool.
He got his own charcuterie board. He will make you bacon wrapped scallops. He loves food.
Love that.
That's super fun.
That's super cool.
But you wouldn't have known. His first experience with food was he's going to turn his head and spit it out and refuse. And I found myself in tears those nights. Partly because I was like, oh, I'm so excited for this stage and for us to share this together. And I'm, this was so fun the first time around. I think, just knowing that, again, listening to your baby's cues and your intuition and not following a rule book too closely and following the recommendations so closely that you override your own, baby and maternal cues.
Yeah. Exactly. And I say that all the time with our families. Is like, every baby is different. I know it can sound a little bit cliche, but it is so true. And honestly, even from the same parents in the same household, those babies aren't different either. Like you were just saying, what worked for your oldest didn't necessarily work for your second, and that is okay. I do think that, for all of us, I think we really do just need to trust ourselves a little bit. One of the things that I, really recommend is providing that consistency for your child and providing them those really great routines. But at the end of the day, they're going to show you what's working and what's not in their own ways, whether that is with feeding or within sleep or that sleep schedule. They're going to show you, they're going to communicate that maybe in a different way than what you initially think of, but they will show you when something isn't quite working. And to
Yeah.
definitely, hey, do you mind if I take a step back for a second? You kind of mentioned allergy introduction with powders. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about that? That's one thing I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah. Yes. So we have partnered with some great companies like Ready Set Food who
Mhm.
have allergen powders as a way to introduce, prior, you can do so alongside solids, which is why it's been a great partnership for us because their powders have gone so well into our purees,
Oh,
right?
awesome. Yeah.
But if your baby's not ready for solid food yet, but the introduction is important to you, you can, have a egg powder, milk powder, peanut powder, etc.
Oh, that
that
is
can
awesome.
just be mixed into their breast milk or formula. So just right into
Yeah.
your normal routine. And we actually just introduced a peanut powder for that very reason.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's really important is not just the early exposure at 4 to
Mhm.
6 months, but continued repeated exposure. So if you think about, okay, my baby, the research shows that 2 grams of peanut protein 3 times a week
Mhm.
is sort of the efficacious dose to help prevent food allergies or peanut allergies by up to 80%. So
Yeah.
if you're thinking about that multiple exposures, how am I going to give my baby peanut, a few times a week? Well, we could have a meal with peanut in it, or we
Mhm.
can make it
Mhm.
really easy for you to add peanut to any of our meals so that you have that repetition.
Yeah.
And that's something that we are really, proud to lead in. We have meals like hazelnut pumpkin pie
That sounds
and little beef.
delicious.
So good. They're all so good. A salmon mash that will be coming again soon, a little cashew chicken. Anyway, a lot of different meals that introduce almond butter and banana. So good.
Yeah.
Different allergens, and to really offer that
Yeah.
that whole food, opportunity for that
Experience.
exposure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So really, once we kind of get into that 6 month time too, is really when we can start to be a little bit more varied and just increasing exposure. I think that that's kind of one of the main goals during that period, that 6 to 12 months. Just curious, do you kind of, if somebody says like, hey, Katie, I am going to start solid meals with my baby, what should I start with? Do you have a go-to of what you really typically recommend?
Um, Again, not trying to be too prescriptive, right? I think
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
earliest days, I mean, science shows, right? If you give
Mhm.
your baby a fruit first or a vegetable first, that's not the thing that matters. What matters is the diversity and in the exposure to a lot of different kinds of foods and
Mhm.
flavors. So in those first months, especially, making sure that you offer them as many different, textures, flavors, experiences so
Mhm.
that they can really learn to like and accept new foods is really important, as well as obviously from the allergen perspective, that early exposure of many different foods and potential allergens is really helpful.
Yeah.
There's this kind of old recommendations that are still being tossed around quite a bit, which is introduce only singular ingredient purees and wait 4 to 5 days in between. And actually, that recommendation is really being debunked in that if you think about it, if you were to give a baby broccoli and then wait 4 to 5 days, 3 to 4 days, whatever,
Mhm.
and then banana and 3 to 4, over the course of a month, you've given them maybe 10 different foods in a window of time in which they're actually most susceptible to liking new flavors. And in a window of time where early exposure to new foods is most important for their
Yeah.
food allergy prevention. So we recommend offering one allergen at a time. I think it is important to be able to give yourself, a day
Some
to
breathing
see any
room.
reaction, right?
Yeah.
A food allergy reaction like a rash or that's going to happen within usually minutes, hours. It's not going to be 3 days later, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so making sure that you've given yourself some time to look for those reactions. But in general, it's totally okay to start with, a multi-veggie combo or a fruit and
Mhm.
veggie and
Mhm.
a grain,
Mhm.
whatnot, right? And again, looking at the whole picture of what they're eating, less so prescriptive of like, I have to follow it exactly this way.
Like then peas,
But more
then
so
sweet
like,
potato, and then yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is sort of fun to have a little tracker and check off the things that you've tried. And
Mhm.
but really, again, while we have in some ways created Square Baby to be somewhat prescriptive in that we say, hey, any 2 to 3 meals is 100% of their daily nutrition. Like if they don't have 2 meals a day and they're 6 to 8 months old, it's okay. You know, maybe your baby wasn't super hungry, or they took in more, milk that day. These are all based on general recommendations. And I think that, having these foolproof solutions is really great, where we've kind of taken the science and the research off your plate
and done the work
but
for you.
Understanding that, yes, that following anything too closely to a T is just stressful. So I think variety, veggie forward, I think, thinking about, especially in that 6 to 8 month period, about the foods that they're going to be most easily to digest. Right. So, I wouldn't give my kid a cup of pureed beans at 6 months. Right?
Yeah. Probably hold up on that.
You're going to have a very gassy baby. It's like a whole bunch of broccoli. It doesn't mean don't introduce beans and broccoli until they're, a year old or something. It just means be
thoughtful of those instructions.
And mindful of
when we are working with a client, and one kind of tip, I guess, quote unquote, that we give is, I really like, and I don't know your thoughts on this, but I really find it that works a lot, not better, but works really well for a family when they're still introducing solid meals. Like let's say they just have one a day, to do that more as a breakfast for a couple of reasons. One is that just like you were saying, Katie, if you're starting to introduce allergens into the meals, you have the whole day, right? When you have eyes on baby, that you can be watching for those reactions, as opposed to in the middle of the night. The other thing too, especially once you start introducing more things like more fibrous things, or things that are more higher in fiber, or higher in carbohydrates, we don't want to change a dirty diaper in the middle of the night. Ideally, like we're trying to prevent some of that. But then also too, I find that it's babies a little bit more alert, and just, babies tend to be kind of more at their best in the earlier part of the day. And so really kind of getting them engaged in that experience too, because I'm all about like, let's make it fun. If they get dirty, totally okay, so that they also have the energy to really be practicing that new skill, because it is a skill and it does take practice, and that stamina as well for them too. Yeah, definitely. One of the things that we could, speaking on kind of timing of foods, have you gotten any feedback from your clients or things like that you have, that you kind of get asked about with questions, or when in the day to do it? Did you guys ever get questions like that from Square Baby or your clients?
That's really interesting. We get a lot of questions just about general nutrition, I think kind of leaning on my dietetic background. But I don't get a lot of questions about the timing of it. And it's interesting, because you wonder if that's something that they've sort of intuitively figured out, or perhaps they're not, they're not used to reaching out to a brand asking.
That's true. That's true.
I love the answer. I'm always here.
Yeah. Well, so when we talk about timing for things, because we're working on like nap schedules or daytime schedules, and so it's a pretty natural leading question. One thing that we have, just like you were saying, especially even in the first year, really want most or a lot of their nutrition, their calories coming from that breast milk or the formula as well. And so one thing is to try to prioritize that. So we find it works really well to do, wake up, have that milk feed, whether that is breast milk or formula, then wait about an hour and a half, and then offer the solid meal. So whether that's the breakfast or then the lunch. And that works really well for the baby to still get that really good, important nutrition within the milk feed, but that they're also hungry enough so that when you do give them the solid meals, they're not just kind of pulling away with their head, like you were saying earlier, and that they're really they're ready for additional food, right? The one thing that it also really helps to have that kind of spacing is one thing that we've talked about, or we talk about a lot, something called sleep associations. Are you familiar with that term, Katie?
Probably not as well as I should be. Well, my kids are so old now.
No worries. Whenever I say that, I'm like, this is always like such like niche thing sometimes, it's like if you don't know the terms, no, I mean, I always say that to families too. But it's basically just like a cue for sleep, right? It's something that is a cue. A sleep association is a cue for sleep. It prepares our mind and our body for sleep time. We even have sleep associations, Katie, even as adults. I have a pillow that I love to sleep with, and it kind of like gets my body ready for sleep. For babies, sometimes feedings, a lot of times, can become a sleep association, and where we kind of get into a little bit of, which is not necessarily bad if it's working for a family, just like you said, Katie, if it's working, continue to do what you're doing. If you are starting to see some more broken sleep and baby is being fed to sleep, or you're experiencing other resulting challenges, like maybe baby's not getting as full of feeds because they're super sleepy on a feed, then that's when we start to adjust those routines and provide baby with different sleep cues. And that's really where we come in within our process. So that's one thing that also helps, having that spacing between, feed time is feed time and sleep time is sleep time. And I know that you talk a lot about not only having that really good balanced nutrition, but also that they're getting the food that they need or the calories that they need in the daytime hours. And that's one of the reasons why we also really want to encourage those really good full feeds, because that also helps with their sleep as well. If like you were to have a snack, Katie, like if you were just have snacks throughout the whole entire day, I bet when you got to nighttime, I bet you probably wouldn't be feeling super satisfied. And that's the same thing too with our little ones.
Yep.
So, yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah. What about foods to avoid? Like, we should not be doing that, Chelsea. We should not be doing that. I know there's probably like some that are like, duh, we shouldn't.
Yes, exactly. Like avoid caffeine, so if you were giving your baby, a shot of espresso before bed, maybe stop that.
Stop that.
It's funny when you sort of like look at the recommendations, it's like, you do realize that we're talking about infants here, but okay, great.
I know.
Noted.
Or the old recommendations, like the ones like 40, 50 years ago, sometimes make me chuckle too, just because it's pretty cool how we've evolved and actually improved our lives too.
I know, right? So yes, avoid caffeine, but thinking about the other things that can be stimulants, like a high sugar meal and something that could like spike their blood sugar. So thinking about, that balanced nutrition really adding to the blood sugar regulation. So complex carbohydrates and healthy fats and protein all together are going to really help to regulate that blood sugar versus like giving your baby straight mango right before, right, very kind of high concentrated, higher sugar meal. So avoiding that before sleep is a good idea. And then again, we were talking about food and sensitivities and allergies. Of course, giving your little ones something that is going to be challenging for them to digest, that really high fiber meal or the gassy vegetables and beans that, at any time of day might cause a little discomfort. Doesn't mean we don't give our baby, broccoli and beans and cauliflower, but it means probably not a good idea to have a larger dose of that right before bed. And as you mentioned, if they have a true allergy or sensitivity beyond just, gassiness, which is kind of universal, right, for certain foods, right? Just being really aware and mindful of the foods that might trigger them to have a reaction that's going to interrupt their sleep schedule. And I think all of that is like, pretty intuitive and makes sense, but I think it's just a good thing to be mindful of.
And something that we talked about before, those foods that actually help promote better sleep. And I actually had a client last week, and we actually were working through some food things that she was trying to figure out some sensitivities that her baby might have. And so she was working closely with her doctor too, to figure out where are those potential allergies. But she was like, hey, she even said, I know you're not a dietitian, Chelsea, but hey, could we just sit down and maybe like help me just brainstorm some things that would be good for for example, for nighttime, for bedtime. And I know like one thing I always find is like really things that like are protein based too, which is really great. Like things like yogurt is phenomenal. I know that you've talked about like salmon is wonderful as well, to have that promotes better sleep. Any of those other things that you would say like, yeah, it's probably a good thing to maybe think about maybe for bedtime or dinner time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we certainly heard about tryptophan every year around the Thanksgiving table, right? We
Yeah,
talk about
turkey.
having turkey and getting tired.
Yeah.
So that is a real thing. And you can also
Mhm.
find tryptophan in bananas. But you mentioned yogurt, which is a great source of potassium and magnesium, as well as bananas, again, and sweet potatoes. So as I was thinking about this, like, gosh, that combination actually sounds pretty good. You could have
Mhm.
alongside oats, which have a, obviously a lower sugar whole grain with, a little bit of fiber, not challenging to digest. Maybe start with like an oat cereal even. So
Yeah.
it's easier. These are like earlier bites, right? Versus a whole grain. But these complex carbs alongside certain vitamins and minerals can help regulate blood sugar, but also promote relaxation and sleep. So I'm kind of thinking oats, bananas, yogurt, sweet potatoes
Yeah. All the bananas.
together. Yeah. Sounds
Uh,
pretty balanced.
I remember when both my kids, but mealtime, like you were saying with your first, it was just like so, so fun. And I remember kind of like making this like kind of setting my child up. Like I would get like the bib and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna like set her down here and this is what I'm gonna give her, just because I was really enjoying it. But I think one of the things too, and I love your take, but it's kind of just like the no pressure kind of environment, like around feeding, and more of a relaxing kind of, I guess you can say no pressure, relaxing setup, I guess, or your environment around feeds. And the similar, honestly, is with a bedtime routine too. But what's your take on that? What are your thoughts there?
I totally agree. And I'm glad that you brought this up because I think that, having babies 15 and 12 years ago, the internet was a different thing then, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And there were a lot less recommendations floating around. And I think right now can be a really hard time if you're, putting a lot of weight towards what's working for everybody else or what other
Yeah.
people believe is the right way to do things. We only do purees or we only do baby led weaning and this way is right and this way is wrong, or you have to do this or you have to do that, or, that's not, isn't, you know,
Life. That's not life.
it just isn't right. It isn't
Yeah.
reality. It is not helpful. Despite how much I think people offering recommendations are trying to be helpful, I think removing that pressure and listening to yourself and your little one of, what works for our family, what feels right, listening to baby's cues, as I do really think that, babies also feeding off of our energy.
Mhm.
And I think back to, the mood that I probably brought to my second baby's interaction with food. And who knows, maybe had nothing to do with how stressed I was. I do remember being incredibly stressed. This was post Starbucks time. So it was,
Yeah.
I anyway, I think I probably brought that energy to those feeding moments. And maybe my little one, maybe Nolan really felt like, gosh, this is stressful. She seems stressed and now she's crying.
I should be stressed. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that again, looking at, science and recommendations and guidelines is really great. And it is important for us to, you know, um, to really
Keep
be
baby
thoughtful
safe.
about
Yeah, keep
the
baby
right
safe.
things for our
Yeah,
baby at various
yeah.
stages and milestones, etc. But again, I think the common theme being that being too prescriptive about anything or one way being right versus wrong just causes this anxiety as parents, like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing it right. I'm failing, or my baby's doing this 1 month later than another baby is. And it's so easy to get in this like comparison game and to like internalize all of that. And at the end of the day, especially these early weeks and months of feeding where they're still getting the mainstay of their nutrition and calories from breast milk and formula. This is about exposure. You know, if your first feeding is like they take down a bite, great, good on
Or they
you.
just
Try again
play in it.
in a few hours, right? Like
Yeah.
they do not need to finish the meal. This is there's no right or wrong way to this, but it's more so about starting to create that relationship with food and starting to create those routines and starting to practice and having success and moving past the failures and trying again. And, but at the end of the day, you're pretty chill about it and don't put too much pressure on yourself or your baby to kind of perform in a certain way.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna have a lot more success and it's gonna be a lot more fun. And you're gonna look back and, and enjoy that time that you had together versus feeling like it was a success or a failure.
And
right?
you're following a certain script, or you're following a certain guideline, and you have to be within that parameter. And yes, one thing that we talk a lot about, and I always say, especially with sleep, they can feel, like you were saying, they can feel our emotions, and they are taking cues from us as well. And so finding a routine that feels sustainable for you is probably the best thing that you can do, not only for yourself, but for your baby, right? When we're talking about adjusting sleep routines, it is a transition, it is an adjustment, but your baby is taking cues from you, and they're going to feel that faith or that confidence that you have in them too, when it comes to changing what a sleep routine looks like. If we are making that routine to be more sustainable for you and for your baby, and same thing too with feeding, like if you're a little nervous or kind of, doesn't quite feel right, that's probably going to come off a little bit. And please, like, if you're listening, don't take that as a criticism, but if something's not quite working, don't feel like you have to do it exactly in that way. If it needs to be a little bit different than maybe a blog you read online, then that's okay. Like you were saying, Katie, like if you need to adjust it a little bit so that it does work for you and your baby, that's great. If you are holding your baby instead of in the high chair initially, or if you're in the high chair and you're just giving like little bits and pieces on a spoon, if that's working for baby too, that's great. You know what I'm saying, Katie? So I think that all of those are really, really, I guess, reassuring. I wish that somebody would have told me that, though, like when I was a first-time mom, I just put so much pressure on myself. Obviously, I did things differently with my second born because I think I just let go of some of that. But that's one of the things I always wish for moms that we work with too. It's like, it's okay, So
give yourself some grace,
give yourself some grace, yes. And every day is a fresh start. If the day didn't go quite as you planned, that's okay. You can always start fresh the next day too. So that's important for all of us to remember. Adults too, right? Adults and babies. Well, honestly, Katie, you are so fun, and I cannot thank you enough for being here with us today. I really hope those of you that are listening, that really just you've come away with some really helpful information as well. So if I am somebody, Katie, and I'm listening to this episode of our podcast, and they would really love some additional information about Square Baby, where should they go? What are their next steps?
Absolutely. So squarebaby.com is our website, and you can build a dietitian designed, customized meal plan for yourself. But you're also just looking for more information. We have a ton of blogs where we get sometimes very, nerdy and deep into the research and the science. So you can spend hours in the middle of the night culling through that. But honestly, like we really take, customer service and being there for our families very seriously. It's why we do what we do. And so, customer service comes directly to me. I am the one who is answering emails. So if you have a question on nutrition or how to get started or anything, hello@squarebaby.com or on social media @squarebabyfood on Instagram, Facebook, etc. So DM us, follow us, reach out. We are here. We have been where you are in so many of the situations, right? And just here to be helpful however we can. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you follow us too on Instagram, we follow Square Baby, so you can always find them through our account as well. Okay, before we go, I have one silly question maybe to ask. What is your favorite flavor or favorite food that you have right now at Square Baby?
Ooh,
I'm putting you on the spot. I did tell you I was going to ask you this question.
I know this is really silly because it's just like, oh my God, just name one. You love them all. I get it. Well, I have an affinity for our beet berry meal because it's been on our menu since day one. And it's what got my little one, who's now almost 12, to love the flavor of beets. And beets are something that I didn't enjoy until I was 30. And now if a beet is on a menu, I'm getting whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
The very first time, like we would come home, because we the first 3 years we made the food in a commercial kitchen, my co-founder and I. So we made the first 100,000 meals by hand. And we would come home after making like 800 meals. And my son would be like, did you make beet berry today? And I'd be like, I did. Would chuck it like this. And the very first time he had strawberry shortcake, I feel like I couldn't even write this any better. He was like, but can I have beets on it? And I was like, oh my God. First of all, there's so many parenting that I can admit to and things where I should be embarrassed by what my kids have said or done, or how, all the parenting fails. But that moment I was like, oh my God, he wants beets on his strawberry shortcake. And so
doing something right.
Yeah. He loves the flavor of beets because they're not hidden, they really, anyway. So I have like a little special place in my heart for that meal.
Well, thank you for answering that. I was thinking about that actually the other day when we were talking about this podcast, and I was like, I definitely want to hear your opinion on that. What are your favorites? So, and as always too, if you're if you're a parent struggling with sleep, if you are not sure what that daytime schedule should look like, as always, we are here for you. So head to our website, restedmamahappybaby.com, for more info on our approach and our programs. But please know too, you can always reach out to us. Do follow us on Instagram and Rested Mama Happy Baby. Katie, thank you so much for your time today. And we really look forward to more conversations around this and our continued partnership. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I had a blast. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Rested Mamas Talk. To stay connected and get more sleep tips from us, follow us on our Instagram page at rested_mama_happy_baby. To find out how we're helping families around the world get better sleep, check out our website, restedmamahappybaby.com, or chat with us directly to learn more about our programs. Chat with you next time.